This video is for the AQA A2 Business specification for Unit 9, looking at internationalism. So this is a theory which relates to the strategies and the reasoning as to why you'd want to expand operations abroad, and it's by Bartlett and Ghoshal, and it's their international, multi-domestic, transnational and global strategies model. So what this model looks at is there's two, clear reasons as to why you might want to operate abroad. There's pressures based on cost. So in terms of, you believe that by expanding your operations overseas, you can get many cost advantages. For example, a key one is achieving economies of scale. Or it could be to do with more related to revenue generation, in terms of believing that you can enter a foreign market, you can maybe cater for their local taste and their preferences, and that'll really help generate revenue. So the strategy splits it up into four different elements on the matrix. If we think about businesses that have a real pressure of cost and they want to take a cost advantages of moving abroad, then you'd be looking at global strategy and transnational strategy. Now the difference between the two is that the global strategy, they do not believe they need to really cater for local tastes. They don't believe that there's a lot of pressure on their type of goods or products or industry, that they need to really glocalize for that market. And what I mean by glocalize is thinking locally but acting globally. And it's this whole idea of catering for that local foreign market. Transnational strategy, they want to achieve cost advantages, but they also know or believe that they have to consider that specific market as well to really succeed. In terms of catering for the local responsiveness, then again transnational is one of the key strategies, but the other one is multinational strategy. Now multinational strategy, they haven't got many cost pressures, but they do know if they want to operate successfully in the foreign market, they have to globalize. And finally, the other strategy is just it's quite a simple, basic one, and it's called an international strategy, where they're expanding abroad, but they don't really have any pressures in terms of the local market or cost pressures, or that's what they believe. So when I look at the force for local responsiveness, some of the questions that you could ask yourself is: do customers in each country expect the product to be adapted to meet local requirements? And I think that's crucial, because if the customer does expect it, or if the customer, the trends, the fashions, just the culture in terms of that country is not appropriate for the goods that you are selling in your domestic market, then you cannot, continue operating in a foreign market with that same product. Another factor is: do local or domestic competitors have an advantage based on their ability to be more responsive? So what I mean by that is, if there is for example, a sudden trend or a sudden change within that market, will the local domestic competitors be able to react to that, because they know the market very, very well, and they're also willing to globalize, and they're willing to not necessarily globalize but cater for local tastes. The other one is force for cost pressure, and again, what it looks at is how important is standardization of the product in order to operate efficiently. Now, a key factor in terms of cost is this whole concept of economies of scale. So when we're looking at the high pressures of cost, it's looking at the most effective and the most efficient ways of achieving economies of scale. It could relate to other cost advantages as well, though. So, for example, economies of scope, or maybe how able are they to operate on the experience curve in terms of reducing their costs and so on. Another question is consistent global branding required in order to achieve international success? So some companies believe that they don't need to globalize because their brand is more important. Customers will want that brand because of how significant that brand is, and therefore it's more of a global want, a global need, rather than local trends. Just to give you a little bit more information, I've just broken it down into the different strategies. So again, international strategy is taking the products first produced for the domestic market and then selling them internationally with only minimal local customization. So again, they're not really doing that much within that market. They might not have really researched it. They try. I think it's quite a low cost type of strategy where maybe they haven't got the budget perhaps. Multi-domestic strategy focus on increasing profitability by customizing a firm's products so they provide a good match to taste and preferences in different international markets. Again, often known as localization. I prefer the term globalization, especially if we're looking at internationalism. Remember, that means thinking locally, acting globally. Global strategy focuses on increasing profitability by benefiting from cost reductions that come from economies of scale, experience curve effects, and again, economies of agglomeration, so external economies of scale. Sometimes it does involve global standardization of a product. So standardizing, what I mean by that is selling the same product in every single country. But again, from that, there's a lot of mass production involved, and that can help with efficiency. A transnational strategy tries simultaneously to achieve lower costs through location economies of scale, experience curve, even economies of scope, but also to differentiate products across different international markets. Now, the best way I think to really understand these markets, or these different types of strategies within a foreign market, is to look at real life examples. So we'll do that now. So the examples I've thought of, I believe, fit into these type of strategies. So, for example, in terms of the global strategy, the need for economies of scale to be exploited on a global scale, but products can be standardised. In fact, the reason why they can be standardised could even cause the economies of scale. Typically used for commodities, industrial goods, and low price commercial goods. I also think in terms of sometimes technological goods as well, it can be. So I think this is absolutely crucial. Often the decision making is centralised and coordination of branches from headquarters in order to integrate production and fully exploit economies of scale. The international strategy, now this is the one that I'm not a massive believer of. I don't believe it's that common. I think it's quite rare because I think businesses know better, and businesses, if they're entering a foreign market and invested in that foreign market, then they probably wouldn't do as little as this. But demand for products is similar to multinationals' home market, while there is little pressure for lowering average production costs. Product development and R&D decisions are centralised, other decisions may be decentralised, i.e. HR or marketing. Local branches implement centrally made decisions. The next one, transnational. I think this is probably the best one, the most effective one to achieve, possibly the most difficult to achieve as well. But it needs to adapt products to meet local needs whilst benefiting from economies of scale. So it's kind of a win-win situation. Decentralised decisions such as R&D and marketing, which are then shared globally, known as global layers. So the one example that I'm going to look at, they might have, for example, different functional areas operating within different countries, which are quite specialised. Need for a mixture of centralised and decentralised decision making and coordination of separate units. And finally, the multi-domestic strategy. Very different markets with high demand for products to be adapted, but little pressure to exploit global economies of scale. Marketing, product development, R&D decisions all decentralised. Essentially, lots of separate business operating independently. Local branches of expertise and make their own decisions. Now, I've tried to come up with some examples for all four of these. If you don't agree with them, that's absolutely fine. I've watched other videos from organisations and I've completely disagreed with theirs. It's just, I suppose, creating that argument and having evidence to back it up and support. So the first one I've gone for in terms of the international strategy was low responsiveness to locals and low responsiveness for costs. And again, I said this was quite a rare one, but the one that I've gone for is Starbucks. Now, Starbucks, you could argue they do glocalise, but I would probably argue that they, in comparison to other companies and major brands, they don't glocalise that often. Maybe in the odd country, maybe for example in France with their pastry, they may glocalise it, and in Japan with maybe some of their drinks. But there's not that much. They still sell a lot of their drinks completely standardised across every single country. So I thought, due to Starbucks' brand image, they've not had to localise too much. They've managed operations centrally, selling the products they are renowned for. Also, due to the type of products sold, they haven't got the ability to achieve the same levels of economies of scale as other industries, and revenue has been more of a focus when expanding abroad. Now, I'm not saying that Starbucks don't achieve economies of scale. I'm not saying that at all, because they obviously do. If we think about, for example, their coffee bean production, I mean, it'd be very hard to say that they don't achieve economies of scale as a whole company based on that production alone. But if you look at maybe in store and you look at every single Starbucks in that, I suppose within that chain, every single shop, they're probably not at the best, I suppose, the best position to achieve that economies of scale in comparison to different industries, maybe. And some of the other examples I'm going to use today might illustrate that a little bit more. For example, they're not necessarily mass producing different coffee drinks within the store, are they? Yes, they might mass produce the ingredients and so on, and the inputs involved, but not the actual service of the drinks. So I think that might be a better example. So if you go to a Starbucks in America, you go to a Starbucks in the UK, go to the Starbucks in the UAE, they are very, very similar. There might be the odd product that's slightly different, but the majority of them are very, very similar, and they're quite standardised. Now, I've heard McDonald's being used as an international example before, but I think they've actually... The reason why I've chosen McDonald's as a multi-domestic strategy is because of the fact that they operate in over 100 countries and they have globalised many, not just their dishes, but their restaurants as well. So I'll give you a couple of examples. In terms of looking at, for example, the Chinese market, you could argue the pressure for local responsiveness is high because they're trying to understand, they've researched the Chinese market. They know, for example, the Chinese customer base really want fast service, much faster than the service that maybe we get in the UK. They even have holes in the walls where you don't even have to go into the restaurants to collect your food. You can literally get it as you're walking by. If you think about France, in France they might not like the idea of, for example, fast food restaurants. They want it to be a little bit more upmarket. So again, McDonald's renovated a lot of their restaurants to fit the French market. If we think about Japan, in Japan, with their tastes towards seafood, they completely catered for the Japanese market and changed a lot of their meals, made it more seafood based. And again, in India, obviously beef is out of the question, so they've catered it for much more vegetarian options, even creating their own vegetarian restaurants. So some of these are just other examples how they, I mean, for me in the UAE, you've got the macadamia. You could argue, but that's only one product, and it is. So there is arguments that it could be international as well. But I think that the fact that they're doing that in every single country, and it's also to do with the supermarket industry. For example, in the UAE where I am, they've really catered for the fast food in terms of delivery. They've created a market allowing McDonald's to be delivered, but in other countries like the UK, that hasn't been the case. So they are thinking about the local markets and what works, what the customers expect, and so on. So I thought, even though McDonald's still sell many standardised food items, they've got the fries and so on, the drinks, throughout their global network, they do try to use local suppliers, but they're also trying to adapt the menus for those international markets. So Microsoft, I've gone for pressure for local responsiveness is low, pressure for costs is high. Again, you might disagree with this. You might be in a country, or you've lived in multiple countries where you've realised that Microsoft do sell different types of goods for that market. I might be completely wrong here, but you just need to have the argument to kind of back it up. So I've said, from my own research, I found that Microsoft do offer very, very similar products. It's quite standardised across many countries. They've got a massive global brand image. Everybody knows Microsoft. Everybody knows about the success of Bill Gates. So therefore, they might not need to localise or globalize as much. Now, what they've done recently, they've opened up research facilities in Beijing for new consumer technology, especially mobile devices. So they're working with, they've got an alliance, which again is a different technique, remember, in entering a market with Lenovo. And they're obviously well known to the Chinese market. They know the Chinese market well, but they're trying to achieve cost-cutting synergy. So they're sharing their expertise. Lenovo will share their research expertise, and Microsoft will provide their technical expertise. And again, this will help them to achieve that economies of scale with this cost-cutting synergy. So the pressure for cost is high, and the reason why they've done this is to benefit both companies in terms of financially. Now, I think personally it would be unlikely that the mobile devices will be massively differentiated just for the Chinese market. They could be, perhaps, but I would probably argue at this moment in time the real reason why they've opened up these research facilities in Beijing is for cost factors. Now, the Transnational strategy took a little bit of research, and I found this company, again, a company that might go under the radar, but they're absolutely brilliant in terms of innovation, in terms of enterprise, and in terms of internationalism. So they've really adapted to the local market within every country that they operate in, but they're also trying to look at ways to really achieve economies of scale. So I've put there a truly innovative they've got a truly innovative marketing strategy, which allows consumers to choose the nature of the product. So what they've got is they've got social media technology that they use and to try and cater for the customer. They try and carry out the research. They've used the technology to make it more cost efficient and more cost effective when carrying out their market research. Therefore, that's helped to achieve and I suppose achieve that economies of scale. So their revolutionary approach to the manufacture of household appliances is driven by its belief that in this technology-driven age, consumers should be empowered to communicate their preferences directly to manufacturers via the internet. Now, I wanted to give you a little bit more information about this. So I've created a case study based on why they achieve both local responsiveness and cost. So in terms of their social media, new product ideas are solicited directly from users through a variety of social media tools. Users vote on the innovations they want. These are users from all over the world in the different countries that they operate in. Now, the whole idea of this came in the late 1990s, where they had, within their domestic market, they noticed that there was issues in terms of some of their products, but actually it turned out it wasn't their fault. So a Chinese farmer complained that his washing machine was full of dirt, not functioning well, and when a technician attended, they realised that the farmer was actually using the washing machine for cleaning sweet potatoes. Now, this might seem a bit strange, but the Chinese market was changing, the agricultural market was changing. It was seeing high demand from retailers and customers for cleaner vegetables, and they were able to, if they could sell it for much higher prices. So farmers were doing this a lot, and therefore it gave them the idea, well, let's kind of work on this problem and let's design a washing machine to accommodate extra grime and soil. They also noticed, so they created this washing machine for that, which is definitely adapting to local tastes, but they also noticed that Chinese people, and again this is just another example, they often hand wash their underclothes or their underwear. So in terms of they wouldn't wash it with the rest of their clothes. A couple of the reasons, again, cultural reasons, they thought it was more hygienic to wash it separately, and also it was a kind of social factor as well. They wanted to be socially discreet when washing these separate from other clothes. So again, what did? They created a small, low energy washing machine, and this became incredibly successful, especially for families with newborns. Now, they used this and they thought, well, if we can do this for the Chinese market, then surely we can do this for other markets as well. And that's when they started to innovate and create this technology as well to kind of help them to research this. And then the reason why they're also achieving the cost factors is because once they got the idea, then they mass produced it. But also the fact that using the technology helped to reduce marketing costs as well. So they realised that they could cater for the local needs globally and started to consider the American market. They made more niche products, for example, the mini refrigerators for college students. But also, another example, in Pakistan market, they designed extra large washing machines designed for heavy ropes. So they achieved the localization, the local responsiveness, but they also achieve the cost factors. Now, they're also well known, which I haven't mentioned here, for opening up different functional areas in different countries to really specialise. So, for example, very similar to what Microsoft did with opening up R&D labs in certain countries, they've done the same. Now, I also wanted to provide some examples of companies that maybe haven't looked at local responsiveness, and it's been low, but maybe actually it shouldn't have been low, and they should have really catered for it. So one example is the Home Depot. They failed within the Chinese market. They failed to understand the nature of the Chinese housing market. So many people within the Chinese market, they don't buy houses for the long term. They buy it more for investment opportunities and again positive speculation. Therefore, they wouldn't think about buying it simply to kind of self-improve. They're using it more for like trade. So therefore, this type of shop just didn't work within China. Another example is Carrefour versus Tesco, which is a very, very good example of one company that wanted to localize and they wanted the high responsiveness of the locals, and then one company that decided that they didn't need to. Now, Carrefour was the one that felt like they didn't need to, and they were also the first to operate within the Southeast Asian market. But the issue with that was they offered these big like hypermarkets, and Thai shoppers had to travel for miles to go there. Now, when Tesco operated and entered this market, they carried out research and they realised that consumers didn't want to be travelling these long distances, and that Thai shoppers were travelling for miles by bus to the big stores. So therefore, it opened up their smaller stores in rural towns, helping those customers, helping the accessibility and improving the demand from these Thai shoppers.